What's up, dudes and girls? Today we're gonna be going over shoulders, the muscles in the shoulders, the function of them, and also how to strengthen the shoulders. So there's a lot that goes on in this joint right here. And of course, you want shoulders like Michaela right here. They're capped, they're wide, and they're sexy. Oh yeah. So let's get to it. If you want hundreds of exercise tutorials available to you at your fingertips, check out our Buff Fitness app, available on iOS and Android. So before we get onto the major muscles of the deltoid, we're gonna be going over some of the smaller muscles that are located in the posterior section here. And these muscles make up the rotator cuff. An easy way to remember this is the acronym SITS, which is the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, the teres minor, and the subscapularis. That's the four muscles that are gonna help strengthen and stabilize the shoulder joint. In order to strengthen those, there's specific movements that you can do, not only external rotations, but internal rotations too. And we're going over some of those movements that you can do to strengthen this whole shoulder girdle. And firstly, it's gonna be some external rotations. So Michaela is gonna be using a band here. I would recommend using a band. It's just very mobile, it's easy. You can adjust the weight easily by stepping forward or back, so you have more tension, a little less tension, but all of these are going to require you to go very light with it. So first we're gonna concentrate on the rotator cuff muscles that are responsible for external rotation. Now, external rotation is basically this movement right here. External rotation, it can also be done by changing some of the position there, and now same external rotations, are pulling away from the body there. Boom, just like that, externally rotating. So the muscles that are gonna be helping with external rotation are the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and the teres minor. And those three are gonna externally rotate the shoulder just like so. So a few easy movements that you can do is one, with your elbow at your side, or with your arm more at a 90-degree angle, just like so. Boom, externally rotating. So we'd recommend doing these 3 sets, 10 to 15 reps, especially if you're dealing with any issues in your shoulder stability, in your shoulder strength. Even if you're having some pain in your shoulders, a lot of times it's due to the weakness in your rotator cuff. Now, one thing that you don't see a lot of people, everyone's doing external rotations, you've probably heard of that as well, but the subscapularis is a muscle located on the anterior side of your scapula. It's, can't really see it, it's actually on the other side of your scapula. So if you look at Michaela here, the rotator cuffs we're talking about with external rotation is on the scapula facing this way, but if you could see internally, the subscapularis is actually on the other side, so it's facing that way. It's facing the front, so it's underlining there. But that is going to be responsible for internal rotation. So internal rotation is the opposite of external rotation. So if Michaela grabs this, just like so, yep, boom, and then she can be internally rotating. Now you'll see a lot of sports athletes use this kind of motion, pitching, throwing, anything like that. So it's this internal rotation, which is the subscapularis, but also a little bit in the chest muscle there too, helps with that. And that is gonna be important to strengthen as well, especially if you're an athlete. But of course you want the complete kind of balance of all those muscles strong enough so that it can handle the stability of the shoulder joint. Now, why is it so important to stabilize the shoulder joint? The problem with the shoulder joint is that it's a very shallow ball and socket joint. So the ball or head of the humerus kind of inserts in to like the scapula, that joint there, that socket, and it's very shallow. So it's, good thing is it's able to move in so many different directions because it's shallow. The problem is now it creates that instability in there. And the reason you wanna work on and strengthen that rotator cuff because it helps pull that shoulder joint, that ball, into the socket and hold it there. So it's really stable, just like that, boom, perfect. So that's why it's important to focus on and strengthen the rotator cuff muscles first, and before jumping on to the bigger deltoid muscles, because the rotator cuff muscles are obviously Can't really see them. Obviously, a lot of people are like, man, you got some jacked rotator cuff muscles, bro. No, it's always like, oh, those delts are looking, they're popping, right? You can't ignore the smaller muscles because that's what's gonna give you the health of your shoulders, the stability of your shoulders, and ultimately the strength in your shoulders, because it will allow you to do more weight in the long run if you build up that strength in those 4 muscles. So now that we kind of went over the rotator cuff, we do want to go over, of course, the bigger muscles in the deltoid that caps the deltoid. Now, the deltoid is comprised of 3 muscles, or 3 heads, I should say. It's going to be the anterior, which is on the front, the lateral, or the middle one here, and the posterior, which is located on the back there. Now, it's kind of like a triangle there. It all comes in here, and they all insert on the humerus there. So what that means is all these fibers are coming in different directions. Sorry, I didn't mean to hear that. All these fibers are coming in different directions. You know, the lateral or middle portion there is coming around here. The posterior is coming around this section, and the anterior, of course, is coming, kind of wraps around into there. But they all really form or insert right here. Okay, so what's that mean? So the motions here is, of course, with the fibers coming here in the anterior, it's gonna help with that flexion of the shoulder joint. The anterior head can help flex that humerus, boom, just like so. The lateral or medial is going to abduct, just like so. So they're more in an optimized position to pull, shorten, and pull the arm, abduct the arm. And of course now, with the posterior, they're in a prime position or optimized position to shorten and extend the shoulder joint. So those are the 3 motions of the 3 different heads there, but they all kind of work together slightly. Of course, you know, some are put in a more optimal position to stimulate them more, like we were saying, with the front raise, boom, or the flexion of the shoulder. That would be concentrated on the anterior deltoid. And with the abduction, boom. The abduction, what would that be working on?
Lateral.
Lateral, nice. So you know what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay, so we went into the, you know, the muscles, the function behind the muscles, but what exercises are gonna stimulate the deltoids the most? Well, probably one of the most famous and well-known exercises that you can do for the deltoids is gonna be the overhead press. So we're gonna be going over the overhead press. Now, we're just gonna be using a PVC pipe here just for demonstration purposes. And first we're gonna go on grip. Now, everyone's gonna be slightly different, but I'll usually recommend just about shoulder or slightly outside shoulder, depending on your mobility or comfort levels. If you go too wide with it, if you go really wide, not to say this is the most horrible thing in the world, but the problem is, as you can see, as she's pushing up, her forearm is going to be pressing outwards. So what you want to think about in a press, and to make it a bit more optimal, is to have bring it in a little bit more, is to have your forearms more in that vertical position. It optimizes the press. The bar travel path is going to be a little bit more straight up or straight on there. Instead of pushing like outward, you're fighting the bar a bit more rather than just being able to have that nice perfect vertical press. So the grip is going to be shoulder, slightly outside, depending on obviously your anatomy. But after that, once you get into position, you can see right at the clavicle, you're going to be pressing up, which, as you can see, is going to be flexion in the shoulder joint. So as presses, the shoulder joint is flexing as well as extension in the elbow joint. So a couple things that is going to be focusing a little bit more on the anterior delt, because the shoulder joint is now put into this position and you're flexing the shoulder joint. So more the anterior fibers are going to be shortening to flex the shoulder joint, and also the extension in your elbow joint, which is going to be working your triceps. And because it's that compound movement working multiple muscles and joints, you're not only working the anterior shoulders, you're also having help with all of the heads, because I mean, it's a big movement. You're pressing up overhead, especially once you get into that overhead position. We'll have you turn around. There we go. As you can see, that full extension, boom, You're gonna slightly elevate your shoulders. You're also gonna be hitting your traps too. Just like so, boom, perfect, good. So this is why it's such a well-known exercise, and a lot of people will perform this for shoulder strength, is because it hits pretty much the entire deltoid. It hits your traps, hits your triceps, your core is involved for stabilization. But like we were talking about in the beginning, if you have weak rotator cuff muscles, and usually this is performed with a lot of weight, that shoulder is going to be very unstable, especially in that full extension position there. It's going to want to be pulled in different directions. It has to kind of like balance that weight overhead. So that's why it can be important to build and strengthen the rotator cuff muscles to keep that joint in place as you're pressing up. Of course, with the anterior, the medial or lateral, and the posterior heads of the deltoid, they're big, they're strong, they're gonna wanna take over, so it's easy to overdevelop your delts doing exercises like the overhead press when all those smaller muscle groups in the rotator cuff should be paid attention to just as much, because boom, in this position right there, it's in a compromised position. It's gonna be very unstable. So making sure you're working all the muscles that are gonna help that shoulder joint health is gonna be very important. Nice. Yeah. Another very well-known compound exercise is gonna be the upright rows. Now the issue with this exercise is that some people can have problems with this particular exercise, and one of the main reasons is because of internal rotation. What I mean by that is the difference between the external rotation here in your arms and the internal rotation right here. So internally rotating is going to kind of close up your shoulders a little bit. And as you perform an exercise in this internal rotation, it can create some impingements in there and begin to give you some problems. Because there is kind of underlining muscles that kind of come in here, and as you close the gap in that joint, it can pinch the muscles, pinch the nerves, pinch the tendons, stuff like that. So for some people, internally rotated exercises, specifically like the upright rows, where you're internally rotating your arms and going into here, the row motion or the pull, it can create some issues for some people. I mean, for me, I feel completely comfortable doing upright rows, but that's not the case for everyone. So the problem is when they perform this exercise, they're like, oh God, you know, they have pain, but they're like, but this is a great exercise, people recommend it. What should I do to fix this? Now, the reason it's a great exercise is because much like the overhead press, it is a compound movement. So there is the motion in the shoulder, the movement in the shoulder, and the elbow joint there. So it is not only hitting the delts, it's hitting the traps, it is hitting the biceps because now you're flexing in your elbow joint. But because of the internal rotation, it might not be the best for everyone. So what is the fix? If you still want to do an exercise like this, there is some variations that you can do that'll still allow you to perform an exercise like this. One is to use dumbbells. Now you're still slightly in that internal rotation. As you can see, the palms are still facing you, but you can now kind of control a little bit of the angle of where your elbow's out or how much you're internally rotated there. So with a bar, it's a fixed position. With dumbbells, now it's independent from one another. You can kind of adjust, you can find a more comfortable position. If this still is giving you some issues, you can actually even do like monkey rows. They call it, where your palms are actually facing your thighs and your sides, and you're dragging them up just like so. Flaring the elbows a little bit more, dragging them up, boom. So there's all these kind of variations you can do to get similar stimulus in the muscles that you're trying to target without doing a standard barbell or cambered bar upright row that might give you some of those issues there. So I did want to go over this exercise because it is another well-known compound exercise. It doesn't mean you have to do it, and it can cause problems for some people's shoulders, but you can always try some variations in there if you want to see if you can still do a movement like that and get the benefits from it. So we got the compound exercises out of the way, and now we're going to be focusing on isolation movements, which are going to be utilizing one joint at a time. And isolation movements are used to help target a specific area. In this case, like we were talking about in the beginning, 3 heads kind of equal 3 different motions, the flexion in there, the abduction, and the extension. So we can target those specific movements to help stimulate each head a little bit more than the other. And so we're gonna start with the anterior now. Very simple, it's gonna be the front raise, which is going to be the shoulder flexion. So as you can see, Michaela is flexing in her shoulder there, boom, raising straight up. Now, again, like we were talking about just with the upright rows, you can tell a lot of times when someone performs a front raise, you're internally rotating your arm and raising up. And just like we talked about before, some people might find some issues in there, a little bit impingement, some pain because you're kind of closing that shoulder joint up. Oh, yeah, not a good thing. But thankfully, there's a very easy fix. And that is going to be going from an internal rotation to just slightly externally rotating to more of that neutral grip where your thumbs are pointing up, essentially. So you can do that. Oh, go ahead, sorry. I'm blocking you. Boom, there you go. So this is gonna open her shoulder up a little bit more, still doing a front raise, still flexing in the shoulder joint, but now with a neutral grip, which is going to add a lot more comfort into her shoulder joint there. So easy fix, just like so. Now that is gonna stimulate the anterior deltoid because those fibers are connected through there. Now, is it going to target that and not utilize the other shoulder heads at all? No, definitely not. So they all kind of work together, but it's just gonna create a little bit more stimulus in those fibers over the others. And just like the front raise for the anterior, now we're gonna go on to the lateral head with some lateral raises. So the abduction of your arm, boom, straight out, just like so. So fibers coming through the middle head or the lateral head coming in there, they're gonna be shortening in their optimized position to help with the abduction of the arm. So that's very simple, that lateral raise, just like that. Awesome. Now, the next one is gonna be shoulder extension. There's a couple ways that you can do this particular motion, a couple different exercises. One is just gonna be the simple shoulder extension, like we were talking about. One of the main functions of the posterior deltoid is extending the shoulders straight back, just like that, boom. You can even do it in a standing position if you just straight back as far as you can go. Fires up that posterior deltoid, boom. But to make it more difficult and get a farther range of motion, do a bent over position, bending over, yep, and then extending straight back, just like so, boom. Yep, awesome, easy. So it's targeting and stimulating the posterior deltoids. Now, that is the shoulder extension. Now we can do also a variation to hit the posterior delts, which is going to be like a horizontal abduction there, or like a reverse fly, as you might know them, which again, in the bent over position and pulling the dumbbells, boom, outward, just like so. Also stimulating and hitting those posterior delts. So a couple different ways you can do it. Bam, awesome, looking great. So some easy exercises to help target specific areas, because not everyone's going to be symmetrical, not everyone's going to be balanced in the muscles on your body. So a lot of times you want to target specific areas. Obviously you can just do overhead presses and build some great deltoids, nice and strong. But sometimes you want to pay closer attention to your posterior section, posterior deltoids, because some people might have some postural deficiencies. And a lot of times strengthening these back muscles, boom, will help pull those shoulders back and into position, not only the posterior deltoids, but also like we were talking about in the beginning, the rotator cuff muscles, tighten everything up, boom, to help stabilize the shoulders, better posture, healthier shoulders. So all these exercises go a long way, not only the rotator cuff muscles, the isolation movements, and of course, more of the compound movements for just that overall strength and performance. So that's pretty much all we have today. If you're curious about more exercises that you can do for your shoulders, specifically in the pressing motions, because there's a lot out there, Hudson did a video all about the best deltoid pressing movements. Definitely check that out, super informative. And I gotta say, I marked down some new ones too, because it's loaded with some great exercises. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. And if you wanna see more or specific body groups, muscle groups, let us know in the comments below. And thank you for Michaela for always joining us. Boom, nailed it. And until next time, stay by.